Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So we're still working on my little modified customized Champ here. And so we're going to work on something a little bit more complicated today, which is the circuit board itself. And hopefully we're going to get this thing mounted. In the first episode of this series, we did the chassis modifications that we needed to mount most of the components. And we did finish those up in the second episode. And we completed the power section and tested it out. In between episodes, I also went ahead and threw on the knobs and the dial indicators because I just wanted to see how things were looking. The knobs aren't doing anything right now because I don't have anything hooked up internally, but I just wanted to get the look of the face. The last major component that we have to mount on the inside here is this board. But before we can put this in, we actually have to do a little bit of wiring because there are some connections that take place underneath the board and there are some wires that run underneath it. Now I'll show you a still photo of what this little wiring layout looks like. I've gone through several different versions of this layout. Anything that's highlighted on here is actually underneath the board. And so those are the connections that I'm going to start with first. Alright, I'm using solid core wire underneath my board, but I've got these wires run. I didn't really care much about the colors because they're not going to be seen. Now as we transition to the top side, I've got a lot of components to go in here. I've used all 1-watt resistors in this amp and they're all metal oxide. I had a couple carbon resistors, but that's really just because it is what I had on hand. Now onto capacitors. I'm using F&T electrolytic capacitors for the filter section and Sprague electrolytic capacitors on the cathodes of my tubes. I'm using these yellow mustard caps for most other connections inside the amp. And then I've got a small cap here for the picofarad cap. And off the top of my head, I don't remember the composition of those. But suffice to say that there are many types of capacitors you can use for all these applications. And you can pick whatever is best for you. As these amps were built over the years, Fender even changed capacitors. So there's no hard and fast rule. There are two main types of capacitors in this amp, and there are polarized caps and non-polarized caps. The electrolytic caps that are found in the filter section of amplifiers, those are polarized. Very important that you install them in the correct orientation. In the diagrams and in your schematics and whatnot, you'll see a positive and a negative. The positive on an electrolytic cap is the side with a dent in it. And a lot of times you'll see a label of a plus sign, or sometimes you'll see an arrow that points to the negative. Just note that it's important to get them in the correct orientation or it's going to be a real problem. Now the way Fender designed a lot of their boards, almost all the caps point in the same direction. So like in this design, positives are going to be pointing at me. All the negatives are going to be going that way. And I don't know if they did that because it helps with controlling noise or if it's just an installation aid. The non-polarized caps, it really doesn't matter which side you install them in. They'll work either way. But even though I say it really doesn't matter, if you want the quietest amp possible and you're using these film-based capacitors like these yellow mustard caps here, you'll want to try to find the side of the cap that's connected to the outside foil. It's foil layers that are wound around this axle here, and one of these leads is connected to the inside foil and one of them is connected to the outside foil. And if you were to be able to find the outside foil and connect that side to ground, it's kind of like shielding the inside of your guitar. If you can put a layer of metal around what's going on inside here and connect that to ground, it's going to provide some shielding. And I'll show you the method that I used to determine which one of these was the outside foil. And to be honest, in some cases they were pretty quiet on both sides and I couldn't tell you I got it exactly right. But I'll show you the graphic that shows you how to do this using a guitar cable and hooking up this capacitor to each one of the conductors in the guitar cable and seeing which side is the quietest. I've got the outside foil side marked on each one of these. One side of those caps doesn't always connect to ground per se, but there is a correct orientation when they're going between tubes and whatnot. Now with all that talk out of the way, let's just jump right in. And I'm just going to do a lot of this in fast motion. The goal as I'm going through this is to get every connection made into each one of these holes before I solder it, which means that I want to get most of the wiring done outside the chassis because it's way easier to do here than it is inside that little metal box. I'm going to leave little leads hanging off to make the tube connections, and just to make sure each one of my connections is recognizable, I went ahead and marked a different color of wire to use on each one of the connections down here on the board. And again, there's no universal rule on that, it's just whatever I preferred. So anyway, let's get started. Well, since we've got a few seconds here, let me just tell you where to find the layout for this amplifier. I'm going to post it over on the post tab of my channel, so just head over there and check it out. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the thread over there, and I'll try to answer those as fast as I can. Well, the full process took me an hour or so, but I finally got the circuit board done. After all that, I've only got here, here, and here that are the unfinished parts of the board. It's where the two inputs come in, and then one point here that connects to the output transformer, and that wire is obviously already in the chassis. Now the way I'm going to insert this into the chassis, I'm actually going to put some black hot glue down inside the chassis and then just drop this in it, and hopefully that holds it. I've used that method before on some Bluetooth speakers and it's worked for years, so I'm hoping it's going to work in this case. I won't be able to get that on camera, but I've got my hot glue gun heating up and there's really nothing special to it. Well, the hot glue worked out great, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here because I went ahead and made all the connections with the cloth wires that were hanging off the board, and I finished up the heater wire running between the tubes. The heater wire is the last step because it's in the way of everything else, and I think I'm more or less ready to power this thing up now. So just a quick note about the tubes we're going to be using here. I've got all vintage tubes in this. The 6X4 is a General Electric tube. The 6V6 is an old Sylvania tube. And the 12AX7 is also a vintage Sylvania tube. And as I power this thing up for the first time, it's going to be running through my current limiter device that I made here. And we talked about that in the last episode. All right, let's install these tubes. And then let's get this set up so that the tubes are not going to touch the bench. I'm going to plug in a load. It's a little speaker cabinet that I built. It's got a couple of really small high wattage speakers in there, and I've got it on 4 ohms. This is just a test cab that I use for repairs sometimes. It's not the cab that's going to go with this little head here. In fact, this is going to be a combo amp. Alright, now I do have a variac that I could use to bring the power up in this amp slowly. I'm probably not going to do that on this one, and I know my power supply section is correct. We already tested the heater supply and everything, so I don't think anything's going to go crazy wrong here. But just the same, we're going to watch everything as it comes up to temperature and make sure the voltages look correct. First thing I want to keep my eye on is the B+ voltage as it comes in. So let's see how that goes. You'll see this coming up to speed here. This is what's happening as the amp gets warm. You'll see a surge and then it'll come back down, and it's settling in about right where I thought it would. Right about 350 volts. Tubes are glowing nice. It looks like everything's okay down here. I'm going to move this to a different part of the supply. Next stage is 342 volts. That sounds about right. Next stage, 322 volts. So all the voltages in the power section look about right, but I do want to just check the voltage going to the 12AX7. 222 on one side, or 223, and 222 on the other side. Those are well within spec for a Champ. Every single one of those is well within the 10% that Fender shows on all their schematics. I do still need to bias this amp and make sure that there's not too much or too little power going through the power tube. The only guitars I have down here in the shop right now are some thrift store Squires. And even though I haven't set this one up yet, I can't resist just hearing what a guitar would sound like through this thing. So here we go. Everything seems to work pretty well. I'm actually kind of surprised at how quiet it is. There's not a lot of feedback or noise, even with the guitar this close to the speaker and everything. So far I'm pretty happy with this thing, so we'll move on to biasing and some of the other technical decisions that I made as I was building this thing. We'll save all that stuff for next time, but I'll leave you with a shot of the front of the amp. I did a little bit of paint work here to label the inputs and my own little logo and some other things. I've done similar paint work on the bottom to label the tubes and on the back to label the inputs. Next steps on this thing are going to be to figure out my cabinet. That might be more than one episode away, to be honest, but it will be the next evolution in the ongoing saga that is this thing. And in the meantime, I do have some other projects that we might be able to get into, like for example, that Ted Weber kit for the Princeton Reverb clone did actually show up, so I've got that in the queue, and we'll try to work in a guitar here and there as well. As always, thanks a lot for the likes and the comments. I really appreciate you hanging out with me through these episodes, and I appreciate when you check my description because it has all the links to all my stuff, including my Amazon links, which help support the channel. Thanks to all you subscribers, and I'll see you guys next time.